The meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors has been underway in Cape Town. Arabile Gumede is there and joins us now. Arabile, very good afternoon to you. In terms of the program, the meeting is supposed to be, and pretty soon. This, of course, on the back of reports that some finance ministers didn't show up, and of course we are expecting the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, and the Central Bank Governor, Olusegun, to brief the media in a couple of hours. How are things going?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting set of sort of pronouncements that have sort of been put out over the last day and a half. Indeed, you're quite correct. The G20 summit here on finance ministers and central bank governors track meeting is anticipated to end then later today. 4 p.m., in fact, is when we're anticipating that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will be accompanied then by the Central Bank Governor Olusegun to close out and give a closing sort of a sentiment on how things have fared today. So that's in around 50 minutes or so then. So we'll anticipate more conversations from that. But really a lot of conversations have also happened on the sidelines. Yes, yesterday there was conversations around tax. Today also a big conversation around debt relief. And I make note of that specifically because 7 former African leaders have actually come together to form what is now known as the African Leaders Debt Relief Initiative. All of that is aimed at just saying, well, since COVID-19 specifically, we've seen a whole host of African countries, unfortunately, rack up debt because they've had to pay for, whether it be PPE for COVID-19, whether it be for trying to stimulate their economies post that situation as well, which of course created quite a few economies across Africa. And what else was needed post that? So if they don't have a way to then manage their debt, which they had to buy or rather borrow from multilateral finance institutions, the likes of the IMF, the likes of the World Bank, etc., if they weren't able to reconfigure that debt, then it takes away from a lot of the infrastructure development that a lot of these countries can have. This is an initiative that is actually being driven by the likes of Joyce Banda, the former president as well of Mauritius. Mohamed Barkhadine is also a part of that as well. So there's so many leaders actually that are all part of this. And just wanting to speak to the chair of all of this, Olusegun Obasaqnjo, is the chair of the ALDRI, as it's now been called, the African Leaders Debt Relief Initiative. And this is what he had to say about why it was so necessary.
We are concerned about a number of issues in Africa, but particularly we are concerned about the issue of debt. What it does is that it strangulates development. And the money that should have gone into essential area of human welfare and human development, education, health, nutrition, is given to pay debt that seems to be interminable.
So clearly it's very important then to be able to get this right then, and how you actually do it is also going to be very important. So we asked the questions around, are they asking for cancellation of all debt then for African countries? Are they asking for just a reduction, and at what proportion? And really the leaders were speaking about how all options are on the table. It's a relook at the entire debt in order to build Africa a little bit further, because they've taken away money from a whole host of those priorities. In fact, His Excellency Obasaqnjo had this to say regarding that.
Believe that very strongly that if we are able to get debt relief, which is not a charity, it will augur well for we who are debtors, and that's what we are, and they who are creditors because we got the money from them. Some fairly, some not so fairly. But whatever it is, we need together to put our heads together and get relief that can help development.
So, Vuyo, clearly then you can tell that the priorities are in place. And what this actually looks like is almost like a return to the formed and the initial basis then of the G20 itself, which was to deal with what you saw was the Asian crisis of 1999, the Mexican peso crisis that kind of ensued, the 1998 Russian crisis as well that was happening at the time. So it's dealing with the issues of the global South or emerging market nations. And that's the significance here, is that seems like a way to ultimately do that. It also fulfills exactly what President Cyril Ramaphosa had initially wanted, which was a re-look at the debt of African countries. Clearly a key part of day 2 here at the G20 summit for finance ministers and central bank governors. Vuyo.
In fact, it was those crises, Arabile, that actually gave birth to the G20 itself. Arabile Gumede in Cape Town, and of course he will be back a little later on to keep us posted on that briefing to be addressed by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana and Reserve Bank Governor Olusegun Obasaqnjo.